Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, it sounds like here in the UK, we're going to be locked down until March. And I must admit, I am beginning to see a few cracks and seeing people starting to struggle with things at the moment because, let's face it, it's been a year of lockdowns and it's hard to see light at the end of the tunnel. So remember, you can email me directly at any time at techblogwriter@outlook.com if you would like a good old-fashioned chat. And I will also promise to have an episode ready for you here every single day where we'll focus on the more positive things ahead. And occasionally we'll keep each other laughing along the way too. And there is a lot of talk at the moment about improving our future and using technology to increase sustainability. So I invited Svilen back onto the show from a company called Dronamics. And the last time I spoke to him was in April when the world was, let's face it, a very different place. And at a time where many industries are being asked to focus on sustainability, they are now reducing the time, cost and emissions by up to 80% compared to traditional air cargo. And since the last time we spoke, they're 350k unmanned cargo airplanes. They're doing even much more than that now. They're building a network of Droneports where they can deliver that cargo and announcing the first 5 of 35 that they've signed in Europe, which gives them the ability to connect 300 million people in 11 countries, all with low-cost, same-day air cargo, meaning even the strictest border closures won't interrupt supply lines. I think now more than ever, this technology is relevant, so I'm excited to get him back onto the podcast. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Bulgaria so we can welcome him back onto the podcast right now. So a massive warm welcome back to the show. We had a great conversation last time, but we do have a lot of new listeners. So for anyone that missed our original conversation, can you remind the listeners with a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. My name is Svilen Rangelov, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dronamics. Our company is building a middle-mile cargo drone, essentially a flying delivery van. It can carry 350 kilograms at a distance of up to 2,500 kilometers. And because we've really spent a lot of work optimizing the design, it's a clean sheet design. We are able to achieve 50 to 80% reduction in cost of air cargo.
It's incredibly cool, the work that you're doing, and it's great to have you back on for so many reasons. And we did last speak in April last year, and of course, so much has changed in the world in that time. I've got to ask, how has it impacted you at Dronamics?
Well, it actually, the crisis did make us look at remote operations the way that everyone had to. Obviously, building an airplane can only be done remotely so much, right? Part of the team is coming to the office. Very early on, we found some quick tests from South Korea that we were able to deploy, and so we were able to keep coming to the office. But on the business side, it's actually driven a lot more interest than before because this pandemic and the crisis throughout the whole economy turned a lot of people's attention into how vulnerable the supply chains are and how human-centric they are, and they can be automated.
I also read, I think it was in December, only last month, that you had announced the world's first cargo Droneport network. Can you tell the listeners a little bit more of that? Because again, it sounds incredibly exciting.
Absolutely, yeah. So our drone is a big drone. It's the size of a Cessna airplane. So it needs a runway to land. It's a fixed wing drone, so it doesn't take off vertically. It needs a runway. But it only needs a very short airstrip, 400 meters or so, and it doesn't have to be paved. And yet still, we thought we would reach out to airports because in order for us to land at a given airport, we still need to deploy our equipment. We have to base our staff there. And part of our business model, which is essentially selling this shipping as a service, we're not selling drones, we're selling the capacity on these flights, much like an airline. So essentially, we needed to find airports which were willing to integrate our technology and allow us to have essentially a cargo terminal, but for drone airplanes on their premises. And we're very lucky because so many said yes, and it's been tremendous to watch that. The count of airports grow. We are signing contracts, and we're actually adding more of them as we speak. In December, we announced the first 35 of them. With airports which are from very small regional ones to mid-size and larger cargo or even passenger airports. So that's quite unique because most airports, do not like drones because small drones typically present a danger to aviation. We're all very familiar with the Gatwick incident and so on, but it was tremendous to see that they all recognize that we're actually a friendly type of drone. We're just like another airline taking off and landing from their location daily.
And just to put this into perspective, I believe that includes private airports and airport groups operating more than 35 airports in 11 countries, ultimately connecting 300 million people with low-cost same-day cargo service. But do you have any examples that you could share that would just enable anyone listening to understand just how much of a big deal that is?
It's a big deal because, for example, let's say you're in Belgium and you want something delivered from Italy and you want it today. And I know we're not used to wanting things delivered from overseas today, the day that we want them to. But with our technology, that would be possible. You would be able to order, let's say a garment from Italy in the morning and receive it in the afternoon in Belgium. It will fly all the way from Italy to you for less than 5 or 10 euros. And it will happen today. No one really can do that right now. It's a big deal. And then the fact that also you had, in the early days of the pandemic, you had a situation where, and it's still going on today, countries, because they have different quarantine protocols, you end up with a situation where you have a cargo flight coming into a foreign country, but then the pilots and the crew, they need to stay back and they cannot move for another 10 to 14 days. And I mean, thankfully, that's mostly being resolved nowadays, but it just comes to show if you just move the vehicles, because they're not carrying any passengers, it's only products on board. So you can, by having even one gateway in your country, that means you can still close the borders in the case of a pandemic, but trade doesn't stop. So it's quite substantial.
I'm curious, do you think that unmanned air freight will be an important part of the future of the logistics industry? Because it seems like you guys are leading the way, but do you think this will become much more common in the future?
We certainly do. Air freight right now is a minuscule part of total freight, simply because in aviation you have the most expensive type of vehicles flying between the most expensive types of real estate, and for from total shipping point of view, airplanes carry less than 1% of global trade, but it's 35% in terms of value. So it's really you use air freight often as a last resort because it's the most expensive mode. With unmanned air freight, you can lower that price point. So you can open it up to customers that were unwilling to pay the previous prices, but are happy to pay, half of that or a quarter of that and get the benefit of a very fast same-day service that only aviation can provide. So, yeah, we definitely see things going this way. you will still have manned air freight. That's really important because bigger machines need to have crews and pilots. But for smaller machines, the type of size that we are talking about, you do not. And therefore, we'll be attacking, essentially, we'll expand the market share of air freight.
And is there anything else you can share about the technology of the future and how you'll make that possible?
Yeah, so it's certainly enabled by a lot of technologies that already exist, but we also had to do a lot of innovation ourselves. So we're not reinventing, for example, the engine. We're using an existing certified engine. What we're innovating on is the airframe. We needed to design in a way that you can not only have a very fuel efficient airframe that doesn't need to support human life on board, but also a type of airframe that is easier to mass produce than in typical aviation. So the airplanes are made of carbon fiber. Mass production of carbon fiber has always been a challenge, and that's one important area where we're doing a lot of work. And there's a lot of other bits and pieces that are quite exciting.
And one of the things that really stood out for me was at a time where many industries are being asked to focus on sustainability, you're reducing time, cost, and emissions by up to 80% compared to traditional air cargo. But how receptive is the industry for embracing change like this? I would expect that they wasn't so interested a year from now, but I would imagine now that it's a very different story.
Well, the industry has had interest from this. I think everyone intuitively kind of knows that this is the future, that humans are not necessary to chaperone parcels. But the biggest blocker has always been regulations. How do we make sure that these new technologies are safe? Because everything in the air needs to be held at a lot higher standard than otherwise. And now the crisis and the work that a lot of regulators have been putting in the past few years has finally borne fruit in the fact that in Europe, as of January 1st, we have new regulations allowing this type of operation that we're building, and therefore finally customers can see that it's tangible and it's possible and it's realistic to actually get these benefits of reduced time and cost and emissions. And we're certainly getting, especially on the emissions side, we're getting a lot more interest. Of course, everyone's really concerned about climate change, so are we. And one of the objectives of designing with a completely new aircraft was precisely because most aircraft wasn't designed so much with emissions in mind. It was designed with cost efficiency, but that's a different type of constraint.
And since that announcement in December, I know it's very early because we've had the holidays and everything, but what kind of feedback have you received since that announcement?
Well, the feedback has been tremendous. We've drastically expanded the number of airports in our pipeline, and not only airports, but also customers, some big brands, still not at liberty to disclose, but we're very happy that we were able to find so many like-minded people and companies that see this as the future. So I think, again, it's a confirmation that something that deep down everyone knew that was coming, but and that's why people have been so willing to reach out. And we don't do a lot of publicity. This was the first time we did a press release in maybe 2 years. So the effect of that was really tremendous for us.
And it is very early in 2021, but what's next for you guys? Is there anything you can share about not the road ahead, maybe the runway ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so we're almost finished. Within a couple of months, we'll be done with the full-scale prototype, and then we'll do some tests, and we'll dedicate the rest of the year to tests and improvement of the system. And we're looking to launch this operation as early as January 2022. And if we can do that, if the tests go in our favor earlier on and so on, we could be able to even start operations sooner than that. Like I said, the regulatory framework already exists in Europe, in a few other countries. So we're expect us to launch that first cargo drone airline this year.
And if anyone listening would like to check out a video of it in action or contact your team to find out more information, what's the best way of doing that?
Well, the single best place is to just visit our website, dronamics.com, and you're free to explore there and reach the separate teams handling different things. So whether you're a customer, investor, you want to host a Droneport, or you want to use our services, there's a way for you to reach us there.
Excellent. Well, I'll add those links to the blog post that will accompany this episode, just so people can find you nice and easily. I love what you're doing here and how this technology is enabling you to connect 300 million people in 11 countries with that low-cost same-day cargo. It's just incredible, not to mention the environmental impacts that you're having as well. It really is inspirational. But I'd love to get you on later in the year or early next year, see how things are going. But a big thank you, as always, for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks so much for the invitation, and really great to chat with you, as always.
Wow, what a great story. And I will try and add a video to the blog post over on my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. If you just go to podcasts, you'll see, you'll find all the interviews that I've done. I think there's 1,500 of them now. But I want to add that video just so you can see it in action. But the figures really do speak for themselves, don't they? Reducing time, cost, and emissions by up to 80% compared to traditional air cargo is simply mouthwatering. But this is not my area of expertise. If it is yours, I'd love to hear your opinions, your insights, and anything you'd like to share with me, whether it be a question or pitch to come on the show. Remember, you can email me at techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn at Neil C. Hughes, and the website is techblogwriter.co.uk. So, I meant what I said at the beginning of the show. If you want someone to talk to, let me know. Send me a message. If not, I'm going to continue to loyally serve you with a teaspoon of positivity every single day. So, thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.